Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker, licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Welcome to it, folks. It's a crazy market, and one of the things that make it crazy is the real estate agent situation and how you can best pick the agent that's going to do a good job for you. So we're going to focus on that today. I'm going to leave you with some questions. These are questions that, even though some of them obviously are questions a seller would be most interested in, I'm going to strongly suggest that whether you are a buyer or a seller, that these are questions that are valid for you to ask, because it's going to give you insights into how these agents do business. And we're going to talk about some general items here that I think across the board are going to be critically important for you to understand. And some of these questions are questions that you will not see on anybody else's list, because I think that most agents would be scared to death to hear some of these questions. So we're going to go ahead and jump in. Now, the best way to get in contact with me, if you would like to do so, is at my website. That would be at soldbyrobert.com. And of course, as I've said before, got lots of great tools there for both buyers and sellers to get you started in your real estate journey. And obviously for sellers, that first step is trying to figure out what your home might be worth in today's market. Two ways to do that: an instant estimate, and then of course the more involved comparable market analysis, which I'm happy to do manually for you, so I can use my 30 years of market experience to fine-tune that number so that you're going to get as close to the real number as possible that you would get in today's market. And then, of course, for you buyers out there, great tools available for you to start your home search and for us to work together to help find the right home for you. Okay, let's go ahead and jump in. There's a couple of general things that I think are important to understand to get the lay of the land as we look at what's happening with real estate. The days of the market selling your home are over for now. An awful lot of new agents have joined the real estate world, all during this time period when homes were relatively easy to sell, simply because of market momentum, right? If you're getting 20 offers on a property in a marketplace, that makes the job of the listing agent a whole lot easier. Now, a really good agent will still tend to break the normal numbers for a local marketplace, meaning agents who actually know what they're doing, even in a super hot seller's market, will tend to get you more than the average number of offers, right? Because their marketing is a little bit more dynamic, it's a little bit more targeted, and it's a little bit more aimed at getting eyeballs on your property so that you'll get the maximum number of offers. For you buyers out there that are looking for agents, that's the same kind of thing applies. There's a little bit less competition now, but if you're looking for properties where competition is happening, but also in markets where maybe there's less competition, but you need an agent on your side who has some negotiation skills to make sure you're not overpaying, because is one of the most common problems out there is agents that have listings who are trying to justify prices they're asking for properties by using data that maybe seems reasonable because it's only a month or two old, but given the amount of change that's happening in so many local markets, that data just doesn't apply anymore. So you need agents who are going to be in your side, aggressively negotiating and making creative choices in how they frame an offer and going that extra mile, making sure they understand the players in the mix, understanding the agent that's listed, that's involved in the property. If possible, getting as much information about the seller if you're the buyer's agent. And there's lots of things you can figure out about buyers without ever talking to the buyers. There's lots of information real estate agents can get from various tools they have on how much of a mortgage is there currently on the house. And of course, there's also social media where you can find out this particular seller is posting a lot of information about how they're excited to move to Florida or to Texas or to Wyoming or Washington or Oregon, wherever they're going. So you can figure some of those things out, but also through an interview with their agent, you can typically find out what the seller has been telling them. So my point is, we're in a time frame now where agents who are going to get you results are ones who are out there really earning their money. They're not doing what everyone else is doing. They're not just adhering to that 21 things I'll do to sell your house or all of the standard boilerplate things that agents so frequently toss out there as reasons why you should work with them. And particularly now, if you talk to an agent who's only been in the business for, well, how long have things been crazy? If you have an agent who's only been in the market since 2016, 2017, or even 2014, those agents have no clue what a market looks like when the sellers aren't in the driver's seat, right? I mean, for those of us who've lived through the 2006, 7, 8 time period, and the time before that, where sellers were absolutely in the driver's seat then and then completely had the market turn around, similar to what we're seeing now. An agent who hasn't lived through that, who has a very different perspective on how this works and doesn't have the tools to, or at least hasn't had to use any tools to fight a market where the sellers are absolutely in the driver's seat. So in a time of transition, you as someone who wants to consume the services of a real estate agent need to really try to filter out the wheat from the chaff. And let me tell you, there is a ton of chaff out there. There always has been a ton of chaff, but some of it, particularly for listing agents, that chaff has been more difficult to detect because your home is still selling super fast. It's just not selling for quite as good terms it could have, simply because the vast majority of agents out there were looking good because the market momentum was carrying you to a sale. Okay. And I've had tons of conversations with folks over the last few months where they were super happy about how their agent did. But when you looked at the actual numbers, their home did sell fast. But if you compared it percentage-wise to just performance using several pieces of data, and we'll cover these in the question, while the days on market or how long it took them to sell is an okay number to look at, for the last few years, it's worth ignoring because the bottom line is that was a made-up number. An agent would say in the listing, we're not looking at offers until such and such a date, which is usually 7 to 15 days after the listing date, because they want to make sure plenty of eyeballs were on that property. So that's not as instructive for you. What is how close was the listing price to the sales price? And as a percentage, how much more or less did you get than your list price? And if you got higher than the list price, which was typical in most markets I serve, how much above? You may be excited that you got 3% above asking price. But if you were to learn that the average during that time was 8.5%, well, your agent has underperformed dramatically by over 5 percentage points, right? So these are the metrics. You need to look at real things that have to do with the job the agent is doing for you. And here's what your bottom line goal is. As a listing person, as a listing agent, the goal of that agent should be to save you or make you more than their fee is. That's always what I'm shooting for. And you as a seller are going to agree to pay some percentage of the list price to this agent. That number varies. It's negotiable. The sort of industry standard that gets thrown around there is 6%. 5% is super common. And you want to make sure that you are getting the biggest bang for the buck, right? For what you're paying for. And simply by having someone who can get you that top of the range above asking price back when things were hot was still paying for their fee. They were compensating you for their fee and how much they brought into the transaction. So it takes a slightly different mindset. And I really hate the standard list of questions you're supposed to ask agents because none of them focus on the actual real important stuff. So let's go ahead and jump down the list. Now, this is a list you can actually get from my website. I believe it's an offer. If you go to soldbyrobert.com and you go to any buyer related page, you're going to get a pop-up. And I believe that the current offer for free download is this PDF, 12 questions to ask your real estate agent. The first one is, how many of the homes you listed last year did you successfully sell? Now, granted, in today's market, it's probably going to be 100%, right? Because over the last year, or at least a huge chunk of the last year, things were selling. So what you want to find out is, how about in the current reality? How about in post April, May of 2022? If you listed a home, did any of them not sell, or any of them still on the market having been on the market for more than 30, 60 days, whatever number you pick. And it's good to know going into this, what's the average days on market for your home right now? Because you want an agent who beats that number, right? If the average days on market in your market is 60 days, and you've got an agent who has sold a home recently in your market for in 40 days, well, that tells you they're clearly getting more attention. They are representing properties that are selling more quickly. All right. Next, how many escrows that you opened successfully closed? Now, right, again, this is another one that gets right at the meat. How many times have you gotten into a contract situation where we've gone into escrow and then it closed? What percentage of escrows do you open that do not end up closing, that fail for some reason or another? Now, remember, this is important for both buyers and sellers. If you're a buyer, this is going to be a good measure of how does your agent create backup plans, knowing what are the most common things that hold back transactions, right? That one of those big things continues to be lending, continues to be finance issues. And I always like to have a backup plan when it comes to some financing, and that depends on the lender. It depends on the kind of loan you're getting. But understand that your agent can contribute to a more effective close of escrow by paying attention to these elements of your transaction. Next, how many of the offers you have written in the last year have been accepted? This is a really good one for buyers. Because remember, the market back in the tough times was dozens of offers made for every one that was accepted. And I know in my case, I was always looking for an edge. Every single offer I made, I was looking for a direct, personal, more intimate connection with the sellers. And I realized that's trying to pull the heartstrings. Absolutely. I'll do that every single time. And I've told this story before. I had several transactions during the toughest times of this market where I actually got my buyers into the home at a lower price than the highest offer, but had appealed to the sellers on so many different levels with other aspects of my offer that we ended up getting in there and getting that home purchased for my folks. Okay. What is the average days on market for a home that you sell, and how long is the average days on the market where those homes were located? So what you're basically looking for is how do they compare to the market? And we talked about this a little bit with the first point, which was how many of the homes you listed did you actually successfully sell? This is more specific. This is tell me how many days on average it took you to sell a home, and tell me what the average was in the community where that home was sold. If their average is 30 days, but the community average is 15 days, they are being beaten by the average market, which is not a good thing, right? How long have you been in residential real estate sales? So I don't actually think this is super important. And as a guy who's been in this business for over 30 years, I realize I should be saying it is ridiculously important that you get someone with decades of experience. If they can answer these other questions effectively, I don't think that you should necessarily discount someone who has fewer years. Now, does more years tend to equal a better agent? It can. It does not always. It really depends. If this has been an agent who's always run their business with very high touch, who takes their negotiation part of the transaction very seriously, who dedicates themselves to learning all the time in their market, and you can judge that by other certifications that they might have that have shown they've gone the extra mile. Are they a real estate agent or a real estate broker? It's much harder to become a broker. If you're dealing with someone who is a licensed broker, they've put in extra time. And then there's the other kind of agent who tends to use the boilerplate that just has a rote, specific assembly line, so to speak, of how they do things that tends to get middling and average results for the clients, but isn't particularly outstanding. I can't even think of a time when I've worked with an agent who had everything they did the initial stuff, then they had a team that handled all these other things. I've never seen any real breakout results from those types of work scenarios. Now, do I use a team? Absolutely. But you'll never hear from my team. My team does things behind the scenes. I am always the one neck, and I love the one neck attitude where, in other words, there's only one throat that you need to get your hands around to get answers about what's going on with your purchase or sale of a home. And that's me. And it should be, because I'm the one that you're paying. I'm the one you interviewed. I'm the one you picked. It should be me. It shouldn't be someone who isn't a licensed person just shuffling papers back in an office somewhere. And I realize that was a little bit of in the weeds. Apologize. Okay. How close to the initial asking prices of the homes you sold were the final sales prices? Again, this is one that gets right at the heart of what you should care about as a seller. And this is going to tell you a variety of things. If they on average are not anywhere near what the average is in the community. So let's just use the interest, the percentage number that we talked about before. Again, if they tend to get 2% over asking price and the community average is 6% over asking price, that should be an indicator to you of one of two things. Either they're really crappy at picking a price and they started off overpriced, and you can do this by finding out what the average home price was in your market. And you should know this. They should have walked in before you signed the listing agreement with a presentation on what the average list price was. And this is a direct measure of what do they get you. And this is usually a seller's number one concern. How much will you make me? How big of a check will I get when this thing is sold? And someone who performs at the top of that game, who's able to get much more above, or let's talk about the realities of the current market. Right now, in some communities, we're finding homes are only selling for 98% of their list price. So you may come up across someone who's, say, 0.5% below list price, but that's still much better than what the market overall on average is doing. So that might be a good agent, as long as they are performing above average. Because if you want average, you're always going to get average. You're going to get average or worse if you're not focusing on really trying to get the cream of the crop who are focused on results that matter to you as a buyer or a seller. Okay. What types of specific marketing systems and approaches will you use to sell my house? Now, what you're looking for here is someone who has aggressive, innovative approaches, not just someone who's going to put a sign in the yard and hope for the best. And you want to get focused in on this because the vast majority of agents have a very rote, defined set of marketing that they do that is just sort of a shotgun approach. It just puts it out there. Don't take, well, we do Facebook ads as enough of an explanation, or we do Instagram, or we do these other things. Get into a little bit of detail. At this point, during the listing discussion that you're having with these agents, in their head, after talking to you, asking you what the best things are about living in your home and understanding what the community you live in provides, what customized marketing will you do just for my house? A good example. Let's say this is a South Morgan Hill home, and it's near the airport in San Martin. I will, if someone is definitely within range of that airport, I will put ads in all of the private airports, all up the peninsula and on the east side, so particularly in these neighborhoods where flying is an obvious thing that folks do, and then get folks coming interested because of that. If it's a horse property, go to all the various boarding places and stables, all on the peninsula. I get great results when I do this in Saratoga, and let people know about homes for sale where they can save those boarding fees for their horse and buy themselves a home here in San Martin that already has stables, those kinds of things, right? And I realize those are dramatic examples, but even if it's just hiking paths, well, there's tons of hiking clubs. Morgan Hill has them, San Jose has them, Palo Alto has them. You can absolutely market directly to those folks. And that's what you want. You want someone who's thinking outside of the box and not just using the same tired stuff everybody else is using. Also look for someone who's using a mix of marketing that embraces both the most modern and the old school stuff. I still send out snail mail whenever I get a listing to all the surrounding homes. Plus, I do a special filtering of folks who are most likely to buy in the next 6 to 12 months, and I do a direct mail to them for all listings. So I'm doing intelligent things that are thought out and aimed at specific audiences that are designed to get more eyes on your property. And the end result of that is your home gets more eyeballs, and when that happens, you tend to get higher and higher prices above your asking price, or at least higher and higher compared to other homes that are selling in that marketplace. Okay, this is an interesting question to ask because in my opinion, it's going to reveal a couple of things about this agent. And the question is, will you represent me exclusively, or will you represent both the buyer and the seller in the transaction? And I want you to phrase it just like that. Don't try to imply a good or bad answer to this question. While it's usually legal, and in our market it is legal to represent both parties in a transaction, it's important to understand where the practitioner's obligations lie. A good real estate agent will explain the agency relationship to you and describe the rights of each party. It's also possible to insist that the real estate agent represent you exclusively. Now, I am of the opinion, now in terms of legality, it's still considered dual agency, and that's what this is referred to. If it's two different agents that work for the same broker, right? Because your agency is actually with the broker, not with that specific real estate agent. So I'm okay with dual agency in that legal sense, as long as there's two different human beings involved in the transaction where one person is representing the buyer and one person is representing the seller. Your interests will always be best represented by someone who is only aware of your situation in the marketplace. If you have someone who knows what the max and minimum are for both the buyer and the seller in a transaction, I believe that is too much of a temptation for the average agent who might manipulate things to the point where it's simply designed to maximize what their commission will be rather than what is best for the clients. And obviously that would work to the advantage of a seller, but it would work to the disadvantage of a buyer. So unless you, and have I ever done dual agency where I represented both the buyer and the seller? Yes, I have. But only in very specific circumstances. For instance, a divorce where both parties have already decided what the numbers are going to be, and I'm just there to sort of be the middleman, get everything documented and do the right paperwork. It saves them money, I charge less, and it just works out better for everyone. So are there scenarios where it makes sense for one single human being to represent both the buyer and seller? Yes. For the 99% of you out there that are out there doing this, no, it is not something you want them to do. Okay. Can you recommend service providers who can assist me in obtaining a mortgage, making repairs on my home, and other things I need done? This is less vital, obviously, but it's always nice to know that they can find folks to do work on your home or to help you explore your lending opportunities or what your pre-approval scenario might be dealt with, and also for work that might need to happen on the property. I know I use different people frequently. I'm always trying to assess new local folks. I like using local talent when it comes to these kinds of things. And I'm always trying to assess who's responsive, who does good work, who charges a reasonable rate as opposed to some exorbitant amount. So asking someone like myself who's been doing this for a while, or any other agent who's been at it for more than a few years, they should be able to dig up some contacts for you in terms of being able to help you do these small jobs around the house that might be, or big jobs that might be needed. Next, talk to me about your business philosophy. Leave it like that. Don't get into details. And if dead silence is what happens after you ask that question, just let it sit there. Don't let the awkward silence get filled by you. Let them fill it. You want to hear what their philosophy is. You want to hear how they feel about the business. You may also follow this up with what drew you to real estate. Why do you do real estate? What makes it your chosen profession? Those kinds of things. You want to get a feel for the person's motivations. What are they doing? And you're also, in a scenario like this, you're also going to get a sense of how much BS are they flinging when you ask this question. I find when I interview agents that I'm considering hiring to work under my brokerage, this is a question I'll ask. And boy, do my BS lights go off 80% of the time when I'm asking folks these questions. All right, how will you keep me informed about the progress of my transaction? How frequently, using what media? And do you use paperless tools? So this is super important. In order for your transaction to happen in the most streamlined way possible, in the most effective way possible, and in the way that lets you sleep peacefully every night, you want someone who is embracing tools that allow you to, at any given moment, check on the status. And in my case, I use services where you could literally, if you're freaking out as the buyer or seller, you could log on at 1 a.m. and see what the current status is on all the various documents and know where you stand. You want to be able to get updates immediately. You want to be able to sign things quickly, particularly during the offer-counter-offer period when things need to happen quickly. Being able to do all this on DocuSign or whatever online service that they might be using. You want to be able to do things in a timely way, and it's also about perception. Another way I sell my buyers to sellers out there is I respond with exactly the right documents with all of the pertinent information. There's no need for a follow-up. There's no need for a, hey, where's this question from the seller's agent. all of it is going to be exactly what they asked for, and it's going to be in a timely fashion, and everything is going to be signed. There will be no missing initials on any page or any one of the pages where multiple initials are required. It is all going to be done correctly. It's about making that first impression with professionalism, so you need to be keyed into how professional is your agent in terms of dealing not just with you, but potentially with the folks on the other side that you'll be dealing with. Now, those are my questions that I lay out. There are others that I think get covered by these questions, but the ones where you're specifically asking them, compare how long it takes you to get a home sold versus the market. How much do you tend to make, or how much above or below asking price do your homes tend to sell for versus the market in those areas? These are questions agents never get. They are numbers that absolutely pin down the actual ability of the agent to do what matters most to you, and they're going to squirm. The odds are they're going to tell you, you know what, let me crunch those numbers and get back to you. Because again, this is not a number that they typically get asked for. So you're going to want to make sure you get that. But one other thing to be aware of is I find that another thing that tends to happen is instant BS starts to get thrown in terms of anecdotally replying to those questions and saying, oh, well, I'm always top of the market when it comes to these things. So let me wrap up with some calibrations here. I want to make sure you know these questions. I hope you do. But the other thing to realize is top 1% agents on average do not do well when looking at the actual data of how they get homes sold. Whenever I encounter, and I run these numbers every time I'm doing a deal where I'm representing a buyer or a seller, I research the agent on the other side. I want to find out how motivated they are, as it's been a long time since they've gotten a check. And that's not always clear. The MLS isn't 100% accurate on what deals they may or may not have been involved with. They may be someone who's a member of a team with some other folks and get other transactions that way. They may have a very strong referral network where they're sending deals out. So obviously all of that stuff wouldn't tell you what kind of money they're making. But part of the process is understanding how easy is it going to be to get this other agent to be an advocate for what I want in terms of this transaction. And in going in and doing research, and I did this about 3-4 months ago, I went and I picked the top 5 agents in a specific market because I had someone who I'd been talking to who ended up using one of these folks, and they were singing their praises. And I thought, let me just check it, and discovered, sure, they sold the house quickly, but when you actually looked at the numbers, they didn't sell the house for more than what other agents were for comparable homes. They actually got a little less. They didn't get as many offers as other agents. And these are agents that are super good at the marketing. They're super good at being in front of you through various advertisements. But when it comes down to actually performing, and if you want to ask them how many transactions do they close per year, do the math. If you have an agent who thinks you should use them because they closed 500 transactions last year, figure out how many minutes per transaction they spent if they did 500, understanding that they're probably only working 5 days a week, and realize, am I interested in paying someone thousands of dollars to throw a handful of minutes at me for my transaction, particularly when the results aren't going to be the best that you could possibly get for the same amount of money. So just be aware of these things. My philosophy is sell fewer homes and sell them better. I think that's absolutely something that's achievable, and you can be amazingly successful in real estate by doing that. But someone who really pitches you on the quantity of homes they sell really needs to be able to prove the quality of each one of those transactions. Do not let an agent who claims to be a top 1% agent convince you that that's a reason why you should hire them. Because here's the other reality. Typically, the thing that determines whether a top 1% agent is either the number of transactions, which we've already discussed, means nothing. It absolutely has no effect on how good of an agent they are. And the other is the total dollar amount of homes they sold over some period of time. Again, a number that means nothing to you in terms of the quality of the work that they do. So don't let yourself get sucked into that. And if someone comes to you and says that they're a top 1% agent and that's why you should use them, ask them to define, using what criteria are you a top 1% agent? and I know I get this is me sort of being the troll in terms of telling you to go out and troll an agent. But then when they say, oh, well, I sold the most homes last year, say, okay, and how does that number make you the best choice for selling my home? All right, you've told me you sold 300 homes last year. So it doesn't sound like you're dedicating a whole lot of time to each individual home. Why would that be a reason? Since I care most about selling it quickly for the highest amount of money with the best possible terms, how does the number of escrows you closed influence that conclusion? If they say because they sold the highest dollar amount of homes, again, ask the question, why does that make you an agent that I should use? The real question is, how much over asking and does it beat the market? That's the question, because it's all about you. If you cared about how many homes they sold last year, that might be important if you had 20 homes you needed to get sold, but you don't. You have one, and you only have one home you need to buy. So focus on the one house experience and the quality that you demand to have from your agent in doing that. And this applies to everybody. This also applies to my investor clients. I've come across a few investor clients who are out of state, who are somewhere else, who are sort of on the sidelines giving me feedback on their interactions with agents. And so I'll feed them back questions they need to ask, because I can tell that the agent they're talking to is really kind of shoveling a little bit of BS their way. And every once in a while, I get a call back thanking me for us making some suggestions on how to talk to them, because they ended up changing agents. So be very picky. The problem here is that the odds are very much against you, and you need to be willing to interview a few agents to find the agent that's going to work right for you. And the bottom line is, in the end, it's all about trust. If they're in a position to be able to deliver what you need from them, and you trust them, and you're getting a good feeling, and I realize bringing feelings into it's always dicey, but it really has to come down to you feeling that everything that you're worried about will be well in hand by this agent. Okay. All right, folks. The goal is always to leave you with more knowledge on the table than I take up in your time. And boy, do I hope we've achieved that this week. Thanks again for listening. Oh, and before we take off, remember, this Saturday is this month's episode of Coffee and Real Estate Live Chat. This is something we do on the third Saturday of every month. I'd love for you to join me. It'll be on Facebook Live. You can go to soldbyrobert.com and scroll down a little bit. Around mid-scroll, you'll find a graphic right in the middle that says Coffee and Real Estate Live Chat. Follow the link there, and you'll be able to discover the scheduled event for this Saturday at 10 a.m. local time, local Morgan Hill Pacific time. You can also find it on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter. I think it's even going up on Twitch. But the home is Facebook Live. So if there's technical difficulties, it's absolutely going to happen on Facebook Live. So I suggest you start there in terms of being able to check it out. And I look forward to seeing you. Bring your questions. We're going to cover all the latest trends and data for the South County area. And as usual, it's going to be an interesting review of where we are, and hopefully, if we can figure it out, where we might be going. All right, folks. Thanks again for listening. I'll talk to y'all next time.